Good morning. Can you hear me now? Okay. Dear Thầy, dear Sangha, today is Sunday, December 18, year 2022, and we are in the Great Togetherness Meditation Hall. And today we have a regular day of mindfulness before the holiday retreat. You can see the decor up and around. I think I've been following our teacher teaching mostly about Buddhist psychology, and I'm interested in investigate based on the current research in modern science and modern psychology to see whether there is a direct connection between the two. So I always try to learn new things about it. And recently I'm studying more about the epigenetics, and I found it very fascinating, and that's why I want to share with you today. There are a lot of other topics that I might not be able to cover because it's so large. So often scientists are debating a lot about between nature and nurture. So nature is more like what we call our fixed DNA, what we deal with when we are born from our parents, our grandparents. And the nurture is more like an environment that we live in. The nutrition or food that we take in that may be influence our being. So for the last maybe 60 years, our scientists have been studying and discover more what we call the epigenetics. And what they say from the word epi, that means it's over what is genetics. So as an embryo, a fetus, we slowly develop in the womb of our mother. But at different stage, there are different elements, agents, that help to do the transformation and growth. And some of them are well established after we are born. It's like the color of the eye, the color of the skin, or what is the range of our height or something. Some of them are kind of fixed, but there are many elements that happen during the period of pregnancy that it can change. So in other words, this epigenetic can affect our DNA, how it forms, and also through the environment, It can also affect either way. So what I share to you today having to do with these elements of epigenetics. So you can see from the board here, it says it's an attempt to do some explanation why from generation to generation we transmit, and also is it possibly for us to transform our karma, so our inheritance from our parents, our grandparents. The tea has its own time. If I leave it too long, it will be very strong. So we know what the Buddha taught, and our teacher also taught about us is there's a sentence they call con cháu ở đâu, ông bà ở đó. That means whenever the children, the grandchildren are, the grandparents are. And we try to see how much is that truth. Is that true that we are our grandparents, we are our parents? And the other one is from the Flower Ornament Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra. It says the one contains the all, and the all contains the one. And the third one is interbeing. We are inter physically, psychologically. I think we enter psychically, but it's kind of hard to demonstrate scientifically. So hopefully we can do these two parts first. So let's try to see if we can have some concrete example of these postulates, so we can. So we know from Dr. Francis Crick, and there's another woman that discovered, but she was not credited. I forgot her name, but our DNA have a 20 pair of chromosomes, and through that we transmit the genetic trait from generation to generation, and that is we know about it. And basically, there are 4 basic components: A, T, C, G, and they have a sequence. And they kind of repeat. The whole structure is about 300,000 sequence, at least. There are even more. But then epigenetics will tell us more about that, how complicated it is within this 24 pair of chromosomes. And the thing what I learned is very interesting is my cells, or my cell, are produced while in the uterus of my mother, while she is being a fetus inside of my grandmother. Because as soon as the fetus being fairly fully formed with the uterus, there's a lining of uterus, the cells. Later on, they become ripened and become an ovary, from which I was produced from that ovary of my mother. So it goes to say that what grandmother were doing at that time might have influence on myself as a grandchildren, as grandchild. So that's very important how the connection is there. So not only, and that answered the question, I think, what was your face before your mother is born? I think that's the Zen Kungan that we have to do. And the other part is a micro chimera. I mean, one being formed with the cells of separate beings. Chimera is the legendary creature that are composite of different creatures. So the word micro means that within the cells of the body, we can harbor cells from different beings. I think for the purpose of today's talk, I would not be able to cover this part of micro chimera. I hope maybe in the future, on the Dharma talk, I will devote the whole hour for that. So you can see that the same I was writing here. And I think I exaggerate a little bit. I'm not able to delete this part. I did research. I think the strand of DNA is about 6 foot long if you unfurl them to straight. Now remember, there are 26 pairs. So that's like 52, and if you are 6 feet, you multiply by 52, it's quite large. And so in the single cell that I have, there is all the 26 pair of chromosomes inside, not counting the mitochondria and other things, which is a symbiosis between the human being, but that's another subject. And in my body, there are about 3 billion cells. And each cell have a specific signature of myself. So if you pick up a cell from my skin, my nails, my hair, and you analyze that, it will have a signature of me as the DNA. That including all the sequence, about 300,000 sequence of that. So in other words, for it to be able to compact inside one single cell, then it has to wrap around the histone, which is a protein, and it wraps around the DNA strand, and it stay in a cluster of about 4, sometimes 8, double 4, 8. So that's why it was able to wrap all around the single cells. And the thing is the more they wrap it, the more it tight, so it less accessible to transformation. But for some reason, through the process of, I think, ethylene, we're able to unfurl them into the single histone, and they have a tail. So they can, some agent can attach to the tail and dictate the transformation of that specific histone. And the whole thing they call the chromatin. So that the term you need to do like a DNA methylation, which is interaction through the epigenetic marks on the histone and the strand of DNA. And the chromatin is this other thing. And there's some part of the DNA that are silenced, so it doesn't being active, and some part being active. And those free agents can come in and transform or trigger the sequence. Like we don't have cancer, and suddenly later in life, somehow the cells turn cancerous. And this is a better picture I was able to find on the internet. So the chromosome, there are 26 pairs of them there. And this is the chromatin, and you can see the wraparound. And inside of it, this is the dual pair of chromosome that form DNA. And you can see the wraparound. And each of the histone has a tail from which some Asian transformation can attach itself and so when it wrapped very tight, it's not accessible, so the gene become inactive. But when it unfurled themselves into a single histone, then it's easier to be accessible and the gene become active. It could be active for good purpose or for not so good purpose. For example, some people develop lupus, sometimes right after early childhood, or sometimes at the later stage in life. And to me, that explains a lot about the cancer. I kind of wonder why do people get cancer? And some people are not susceptible to cancer. So you could be born from the parents that are susceptible to have cancer, but through your healthy living, we could able to suppress it. And the cancer cell never turn cancerous. Like, I think the Nordic people are very sensitive to skin cancer because of the fair skin. So the sun heat and can trigger and have some become cancers. We have a brother from Deer Park. He developed a skin cancer because he's from Northern Europe. So the thing is, there are 3 billion cells, and at different stage in the process of become a fetus, there are certain epigenetic markers that come in and trigger the change. So what we call a stem cell or proto-cells, it become like the cells of the brain, the cells of the muscle, the cell of the nerve, cell of the heart, cells of the hair, or different things like that. And they solidify, so after a while, the brain cell becomes the brain cell, and they're no longer a cell or a reproductive system, for example. So this is very important that some of the elements, they transform and they stay put. And from some time, like through radiation or something, we can break the cycle, and then they become free, and then they can become active. And some susceptible disease happen, you know. So when we can use our mind, that we can affect the outcome of the dormant sequence. Sometimes they stay dormant, and they are maybe negative action that we can let it sleep. And some are the dormant, but some positive action, we can encourage them through the practice of mindfulness, concentration, insight. So for example, like the gene for DNA for eyes, the ear, body, length, sex or something, they are mostly solidified after birth and the early year of being a baby. But there are also a lot of epigenetic agents, such as different hormones that can affect the growth development of us psychologically, intellectually. And why the environment has a high influence, the early epigenetics marker will have a strong effect on the fetus. Scientists have been studying identical twins, and I found it very interesting because sometimes the identical twins were separate at birth and live in different environment, and they become very different. And yet there's some commonality between the two. Like in our family, all the brother sister of my family seem to. We live in Europe. We live in Southern California. We live here. We live in Vietnam, but we all like dark chocolate. We don't like milk chocolate. My brother sister live in Switzerland, where they make all kind of milk chocolate, but we don't like milk chocolate. We just like dark chocolate only, you know. And then the thing is interesting is even an identical twin, they are not exactly the same. Even they live in the same house, same environment, one of the twins might be susceptible to some disease and one is not. So at first we kind of wonder how come, because they are the same eggs, they split, and yet the epigenetics make the difference. So there are no identical twins that are identical. So actually it's a misnomer term. They're not exactly identical. They might face look the same and they may dress the same, but they are not exactly the same. So you can see the process starts in the stage of ovulation or gestation. So let's say a couple date each other, become fiancé, and getting prepared to marry. So those are the process of romancing, interacting, getting prepared, and during the time the women produce ovary, the men produce the sperm, and the eating, the nutrition, all those elements help to produce a good ovulation or gestation. And the same thing, the epigenetics marks influence that process. Just like I mentioned about how our grandmother eat will affect why she being pregnant with my mom, and why being a fetus inside of my grandmother's mom, she already produced my cells, my ovary, which is the one that become me. And the thing interesting about the sex determination, in the process of developing the early fetus, at some point, the epigenetics mark changed what we call the gonad. I believe that's a technical term. And that would be the proto-reproductive system. So they become either a male or a female. And to me, that explains a lot about what we call now the phenomenon of transgender, cisgender identification of gender. Because I think when we don't have a loving kindness life, we are living in constant stress in the environment and society, violence around. It can trigger, and it makes the system confused about whether we should determine which gender it is. So it's not to say that, I'm not for like gene therapy or something like that. I think to me, let nature develop its course. What we can do, we can develop a healthy living style, which is like for us, it's like living in mindfulness, in concentration, and having insight. And at some point between 1 and 3 months, they are more clear of an embryonic level when they start to form the heart, the brain, the arms, and things. And sometimes at some level here, if some epigenetic marks that are negative come and affect, and sometimes the baby will miss one limb or different thing like that, the deformation of the fetus. And between 3 and 9 months, This is the part when I mentioned about the uterus of my mom got formed, and the lining in the uterus actually will become the future ovaries and things like that. And even after the baby is born, between the first 3 years of life, a lot of things happen. This is also explained why a lot of people develop some different kind of difficulty, like lupus or autism or so on, you know. And it sometimes it's a double-edged sword. It can be for the good, can be for the bad. Doesn't mean that just because you are born slightly different, that means that you are not able to become a productive member of society. So this is explained a little bit more, the time of exposure, when you're adult, pre-puberty, preconception, the sperm development from the man's side, and the ovary from the women's side. And the type of exposure depends on the diet, whether you are being sick during the time that the formation of the fetus, or some other addictive to different drugs at a time, why being pregnant, and it can influence the same thing with the stress and exercise, too much exercise, too much stress, why you are in a period of being pregnant can affect the fetus. And the tissue exposure through saliva, to blood, and to sperm, and all these can modify the histone, and they can form methylation, and then therefore we inherit from our parents, our grandparents. And the good news also, there's certain process we can reverse. For example, if we're born from a mother that was through the famine period, I think in North Vietnam at the time, in 1920, 1940, it can affect all the way to the grandchildren. So the height, even though the parents get better nutrition, but even the grandchildren are not as big and tall. And it takes maybe more than 3 generations to reverse the process. So what is being transmitted from generation to generation? So we have first the genetic memory. So that's the basic untransformed DNA, whether we have brown eyes, brown hair, maybe yellow skin, or white skin, or something different. And the other one is conditioned reflex, the memory. And some people have a talent for music. Some people has talent for drawing. Some people has a talent for science or for the humanity field or something like that. And some people are born with fear, anxiety. I remember there was some story about, for many, including my brother, my elder brother, we were boat people. So some women might carry their children, their fetus, while being on the boat, subject to harsh weather, fear whether you're going to drown or not, and maybe even get accosted by the Thai pirates, and suffer a lot of trauma. And some women witness a lot of atrocity while being pregnant. And later on, they come to the U.S. and they give birth to their children. And so the children are born safe in the U.S., but yet within the psychology factor, there's an unexplained fear and anxiety. And it could be even from the U.S. society. If you are born from unprivileged background with a lot of drugs, violence, you can also have this fear, anxiety. And it can manifests through maybe 2 or 3 generations at least. And the habitual procedural memory, which is like one is a better fighter or athlete, or have a propensity for study, the science or something, and like riding the bicycle or swimming. The same thing with the cognitive semantic memory. So the epigenetic marks can change the dormant sequence of genes. They are all around the 6 feet long, what unfurled double strand of DNA. There are a lot of epigenetic marks that come and change it. And the memory can be biologically transmitted from generation to generation with rats. We are not allowed to experiment a lot with humans, but scientists are able to experiment with the rat. And they give the rat is to smell the odor of cherry blossom, and at the same time, they apply electric shock. And through repetition, after a while, so of course the rat develop a trauma, a fear of the smell of cherry flower. But then sometime they can reproduce, having offspring. But scientists even do another thing, is they get the sperm of the male rat, and I don't know how they get them because they're so tiny, and then they insert into another female rat, and somehow they develop the offspring of that male rat without having sex, of course. And the offspring develop a fear of the smell of cherry blossom. So that means that there's some information being transmitted through the sperm. So there are a lot of things. Of course, if you live in a family with parents living around you and nurture you and change, of course you pick up the habit, energy, the memory directly from your parents. But this male rat is totally separate from the offspring, and somehow the information will transmit through the sperm. And of course, the good news is we can change it through our healthy living style of living. Basically, for us, it's just being mindful and have a continuous application of mindfulness to understand that it's normal to have a good concentration, and out of that come the insight of understanding of our own being. And that we can do it. Just like a day mindfulness, we will practice together, being mindful, being concentrated, and having insight. And if that is not enough, I think the good incentive is to have a loving kindness, which is what we call a 4 immeasurable love, as a motivation. To have a compassion, we have a capacity to have a deep listening and to be able to take away the suffering of the other, and to be happy. This is very important, because sometimes when you think about our background and how we are born and how we come from, we can despair and we say, well, I'm never going to be as beautiful as some beauty pageant or something. But you can make the best out of your life regardless, And of course, inclusiveness. So to me, what I learned from my parents a lot is to be kind to everybody. And if you have a capacity to help some people, just help them. Without asking for result, without asking for anything. And to me, that's a general guideline to live your life, and be helpful for society, help other people. Eventually, those karma will catch up to you. So whether you create a good karma or bad karma, maybe you don't see right away, but actually they all will be called what goes around come around. They come back, you know. Oh, I think that's probably enough. So you see, what I will share with you is the interconnectiveness of everything, including our grandparents, our parents, and us, that are transmitted and interconnect from generation to generation. And I demonstrate through genetic trait transmission and epigenetics how the mechanism of transmission happen. And with the understanding that we can still change our fate, we can still change the outcome of our life, regardless of what we inherit from our parents. And the other thing is, the inheritance is there are many aspects of inheritance that are positive, some of them neutral, and some are negative. And so I think the positive is good, we keep it. The neutral, sometimes we can water to develop into a positive trait. And the negative also, we can negate them, we can transform them. And I think to me, it's always keep a good spirit of being happy. And so we can be a better continuation of our parents, our grandparents. To me, this picture is worth 1,000 words, because it shows very clearly how wonderful human life is. From just a single cells, it unfurled like 6 feet long of DNA strand. And all along that, they have epigenetic mark that can transform. So it could be transformed from the environment, maybe a stimulant, food, radiation, and also from the violence, the behavior of people around you and the society, and even our own family. So to me, this is very important to understand scientifically what our spiritual ancestor will share with us. So thank you very much for listening. So maybe we listen to 3 sound of the bell. So, dear Thai friends, I ended a bit earlier. So we have maybe a wonderful lady named Sophie, and she agreed to sing a song for us. They call "Watering the Seed of Love." I think they talk about we are the continuation of our father and our mother. So let's invite them to come up and offer us that song.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, dear community, dear parents, we'll be singing Watering Seeds of Joy, which is a song that the words were written by our teacher Thai, and the music was written by Sister True Vow. And I want to dedicate this song to my parents who are here today. My mother, my father, they are in me, and when I look, I see myself in them. The Buddha, the patriarchs, they are in me, and when I look, I see myself in them. I am a continuation of my mother and my father. I am a continuation of all my blood ancestors. It is my aspiration to preserve and continue to nourish seeds of goodness, seeds of skill, seeds of happiness which I have inherited. It's also my desire to recognize the seeds of fear and suffering I have inherited, and bit by bit to transform them, transform them. I am a continuation of the Buddha and the patriarchs. I am a continuation of all my spiritual teachers. It is my deep aspiration to preserve, develop, and nourish seeds of understanding, seeds of love, seeds of freedom which they have transmitted to me. In my daily life I also want to sow seeds of love and compassion in my own consciousness and the hearts of other people. I am determined not to water the seeds of craving, aversion, and violence in me. I am determined not to water the seeds of craving, aversion, and violence in others. And with resolve and with compassion, I give rise to this aspiration. May my practice be an offering of the heart. May my practice be an offering of the heart. May my practice be an offering of the heart.
So thank you so much, dear Sangha. This will end our session this morning, and I just ask permission to have some announcements. So after this, we will have a break, and there are restroom blocks just behind you, and in the sister dining hall you can use, and there's also tea and coffee in the sister tea room. And I think at 11 we will have walking meditation together, and we gather outside the sister dining hall. And then at 12 o'clock, we invite you to gather here, and we have the recitation of the 14 mindfulness trainings. And so we can gather 5 minutes or 10 before. And after this, you can stay back and help the sister and brother to arrange for that, arrange the hall for the session. And is there anyone come here for the very first time, like today? Okay, thank you for coming and welcome. And we invite you to gather in the corner there, near the altar. A brother or sister will have an orientation for you how to enjoy your day here. And again, welcome everyone and enjoy your day. And I think Steve has something to share. Thank you.